Welcome back to Spotlight. I'm here with my good brother Ray O'Neill. Ray, good to see you, man.
Thank you.
Yes.
Haven't been here in a while.
Yeah, you had a big shindig on last Saturday evening.
Yes, I guess one would say that. And it
You
was
would-
a very pleasant experience.
Yeah. I heard there was, I wasn't able to attend, unfortunately, but I heard you had over almost 150 guests. That must have been exciting, and all the persons that came from overseas, that your colleagues that became your friends and your
Sure.
associates through your many years of involvement in sports here in the BVI. People like Dr. Amadea Francis,
Right.
and
Fellow Inter-American University man,
yes, and
Sir Austin Seeley.
yeah, past president of the Olympic, an Olympic committee member, Sir Austin Seeley.
He was also the treasurer of the Commonwealth Games Federation for a number of years, and a friend of more recent vintage. Well, with me, recent vintage can go back to 1987. Keith Joseph, who lives in St. Vincent.
And I mean, when I look at the list of persons that came in, it was sort of like the who is who of persons in the Caribbean in terms of sports, the International Olympic Committee, all those people. You have garnered a considerable amount of respect in the sports arena, the regional, international sports arena over the years of your contribution here in the BVI. What do you attribute that to? How did
Well, when
that
I came back home at the beginning of 1969, there was some activity in sports at the local level, mainly cricket and softball were the two main sports at that time. Basketball was just sort of getting on the way. And the high school track and field was essentially one meet, the high school sports day, which in your earlier days there was involved three houses,
Yes.
Aggrey, Bronte, and Cabell, and then all of a sudden you had 8, to the extent that with the increased number of students, a number of the kids did not know what houses they were in, because there was no real activity other than that one event. And a number of us, some of whom would have been teaching while you were there, Kenneth Narine, Gerald Rose,
Yes.
we decided to try to put some sort of structure into the whole thing, and that was sort of the genesis of the Athletic Association. We had, fortunately, some folks who had been involved in not international athletics, but local athletics in places like Trinidad and Guyana, who were very helpful, as well as the sports officer at the time, a Jamaican gentleman with the name of Horace Salesman. And, we took it from there. It was very basic in the early stages. I recall, as I mentioned on Saturday, the first time we had a track and field competition involving athletes who came over from St. Thomas. Somehow we didn't have a starting pistol. And I don't know if the name Bob Gray means anything to you, but he went home and he got a rifle. And the report of that gun was quite frightening for those on the starting line, but that's where we began. Soon we started competing in St. Thomas, and there was a fairly significant meet in St. Croix, which sort of set us on our path, because from that meet, one of the gentlemen who worked with the Athletic Association, of course it was not internationally recognized at the time, he got 4 of our athletes, 2 of whom unfortunately are no longer with us, Cecil Dawson and Velma Warner, as well as Dale Abramson and Gene Hodge, to compete in a couple of meets in Trinidad and Barbados, and they did pretty well. Other sports, were there, but just like in track and field, there were not a whole lot of opportunities for international competition. I think the first sport that really took part in a regional championships was softball. and they went to the CAC, Central American Caribbean Championships in Panama. If I remember correctly, that would have been around 1971. In 1972, the Athletic Association gained membership in the International Federation, and our first actual competition outside, other than just small invitation meets that we might have had here, that you might have had one in St. Kitts, one in Antigua. That first exposure took place in 1975 when we went to the CAC Championships in Puerto Rico. We had a very young team. Several of them were under 18, and here we are coming up against Olympic athletes, and it was quite an eye-opener. But we had to do it because we had no idea where we stood against, the big boys, so to speak.
In the national competition.
Right.
Oh, I'm wondering, at that particular point, what were you guys thinking about? What were you, Mr. Rose, Mr. Janaury, thinking about in terms of sports? I mean, sports didn't seem to be a big deal for us. My recollection.
It was more recreational.
It was more recreational,
Yeah.
recreational and exercise.
Right, and the thing is, too, at that time, there was a lot more overlap. For instance, in Bogus Bay, a lot of the guys who played softball also played cricket.
Right.
And the opportunity to participate in what might have been an individual's best sport didn't necessarily exist. So it was, shortly after that we realized that there had to be more structure in the system. We had our first exposure to the Carifta Games, and I'll explain in a minute what the Carifta Games are. In 1976, three of the athletes who took part then are still involved in sports at some level here. Dean Janaury is the president of the Athletics Association. He was preceded in that position by Ephraim Penn, who is now the president of the Olympic Committee, and Rose Adams has held a number of positions, quite often as a secretary within the Athletics Association. Moving forward quite a bit now, in 1979, the Pan American Games were held in San Juan, Puerto Rico. The Pan American Games encompasses all the countries that have Olympic committees in North America, Central America, and South America. And I recall the games were televised here, and question on a lot of folks' lips was, well, why aren't we there? Mm-hmm. We weren't there because we didn't have an Olympic committee. That year, Dean had perhaps his best year, and both he and a gentleman from West End, Jerry Molyneux, had made the finals. Dean had actually gotten a medal at the Central American and Caribbean Championships. So we realized, hey, if we don't have an Olympic committee, they're not going to be able to compete in any regional or international games. The games are multi-sports events, where the championships are one sport. So it was then a matter of getting the existing associations, federations, affiliated with their international governing bodies. A sort of ad hoc committee was formed in 1980. You had Derry Maduro, he was the sports officer at the time. Johnny Hassan came into the picture, Patrick Harrigan, Roy Pickering, Jim Morris, and Mr. Ralph O'Neill. And 1980 presented an odd situation because that was the second of the major boycotts of the Olympic Games. The first one was in 1976 in Montreal. And people were just dropping off the scene like blazes. And the Russians, they wanted the games to go on and be a showpiece, as it were. And so we decided, well, let's try something. And we wrote to the Russians and asked them, we told them we were in the process of creating an Olympic committee. Can we come? Or may we come? And they said, sure, come. But the president of the International Olympic Committee said, well, stay where you are. Mm. So we actually got into the Olympic movement in 1982. That sort of came about because of a sort of chance meeting at the Rotary Club, which then met at Treasure Isle with a gentleman who came over from St. Thomas, Len Stein. He was the manager, he might even have been the owner of WSTA at the time, and he was involved in the Olympic movement in the U.S. Virgin Islands, and he sort of pointed us to where we had to, how we needed to proceed. And Johnny Hassan and I, Johnny Hassan then was the Secretary General, we made a trip to Puerto Rico. The head of the Central American Caribbean Sports Organization, or the CABE, the Spanish acronym, Mr. Herman Enrique Hoff, he was quite receptive. He was not necessarily receptive to everybody, but for whatever reason he seemed to rather take pity on us or what have you. And he told us how many, if you have 3 federations, have 2 more apply, because you needed 5 affiliated federations in order to be recognized in the Olympic Committee. And he even tried to grease the wheels of some of the less enthusiastic federations that we had. To shorten things, in '82 we made our first appearance at the games, the Central American Caribbean Games in Havana, Cuba. And our first appearance at the Pan American Games came the following year. That was down in Caracas, but things didn't go as well as we would have liked in Caracas. And Caracas presented a number of problems in other areas as well. But the Olympics of Los Angeles in 1984 was our first experience, exposure on that sort of stage. And it was, for a lot of the new countries, I can't recall how many of the small countries of the Caribbean made their debut there. I recall Grenada being one. Grenada had also started at the CSCs in Havana. And when you marched into that stadium with nearly 100,000 people coming from a place the size of ours, it
was awesome.
Awesome.
I'm wondering, when you guys were planning all these movements to get Olympic Committee going, get the athletes prepared and so on, was there a vision for sports and athleticism here in the Virgin Islands from a academic growth perspective?
Yes, well, what happened? Sure.
Was in the territory?
What happened in 1976? After we competed at Carifta Games for the first time, incidentally, Carifta Games was started by Sir Austin Seeley, who was one of our guests here. And we had a decent showing for, first time out, and at a meet shortly after that we had in the summer, Dean performed quite well. And the Rotary Club gave him a scholarship, and he started out at a junior college in California, Pasadena City College. He was followed there by Lyndall Hodge, and Rotary also gave a scholarship the following year to Guy Hill, who went to Santa Fe, is it City? Santa Fe College in Gainesville, Florida. So that was sort of the base of our representation.
So the realization was that you could use athletics as a college scholarships and so on, further education.
Right, but one has to realize that without some sort of carrot there, chances are that the athletes would just have stopped after they finished high school, because the first set of athletes we had in 1972, very talented people. You had people like Dale Abramson, who may well have been the most talented of all our athletes, certainly prior to the Olympic movement entry in '84. Sonny Todman, Gene Hodge, and they were not. These guys often had to do some fairly significant physical work, and combining that with training, it was not not necessarily an easy thing. Then we had to deal with the issue of immigration. You had a good athlete and then 6 months on, well, where is she or where is he? He's gone somewhere. So it was always a case of rebuilding, restocking.
So once the opportunities start to develop for athletes to go abroad and participate internationally, and then to be attracted to colleges and so on, that helped the sport.
That helped more specifically track and field. Later on, there were some opportunities for basketball players, and many of our athletes started at a junior college. One institution that has played an enormous role in our being able to put athletes out there who could compete on fairly equal terms with our contemporaries and our counterparts in the larger Caribbean was Central Arizona College, and that sort of happened by chance. Back in 1994, we got to Commonwealth Games. The second time we went. The first time I was part of a team of two. I was the manager, the coach, the chief of mission, and the athlete was Lyndall Hart's chef. That was in New Zealand. And the following one was it's a quadrennial event in Victoria in British Columbia, Canada. And I came across a Nigerian athlete who I knew had gone to Central Arizona. And I asked him about the school, and he said something that played a big part, that it was one of the few community colleges that had dormitories. And I didn't know whether our athletes could do anything for themselves. So being a dormitory situation, a campus situation where you didn't have to be worrying about buying food and dealing with a lot of things that you have to, that worked out well. The first athlete who went there was a young man from Easton, Ralston Valac, and then he was followed by Steve Augustin, Dion Crabb, and as the saying goes, a host of others. And we've had 3 athletes who went there, became national champions at that level. Later on, there were a pair of twins who went, the twin girls, Tamara and Tafara Phillip, who went there to play basketball. And, most of them were able to transfer to 4-year institutions. And I would say the majority of them have come back home and making a contribution.
They've come back with successful
yes,
degrees and,
right.
and
so
making a contribution.
Yeah, again, that was one of the things that I paid a lot of attention to, because a few years ago it wasn't an audit, but the folks from the Pan American Sports Organization wanted to know what these small countries were doing, because there was funding coming and it could be used. It was largely discretionary, but there are certain things that they sort of had in mind, like starting an Olympic museum and running a bunch of courses. And I thought that money could have been better used just getting people into school. They would come back in the summer and compete for us, and it worked out pretty well, to the point where a couple of the other countries decided to go that route as well.
So what would you say is your greatest achievement from your involvement in sports?
Well, the recognition one might get. I've been, made the vice president of NACAC. I'm not sure why I was made the vice president of NACAC. That's the North American, Central American, Caribbean Confederation. Something tells me that it might have been to keep somebody else out. Because, rarely with somebody like Amadeo Francis as the head of as the top of the tree, there isn't a whole lot for the vice president to do. So I just said, well, I'll accept the position. If he wants me to do something, I'll do it. But more directly,
as far as athlete development, sports
sure.
development.
And I also, sort of took some pride in the fact that I was able to help people from some of the other small countries to A, locate athletes, and B, at Central Arizona College, there was a stream of Grenadian athletes who, I made a connection with the association there, and they went there and a couple of them have won international medals as well. But it's been quite an interesting road. I appreciate, not necessarily the awards, the recognition that have been given, but if I can help someone, I will.
So the success of the athletes was
It's
really
part of,
the
of
pride
mine.
that you
Yeah, and
took. And the relationship that you formed regionally and internationally, how did that play out in
Well,
terms of the development?
how that played out is this way. I mean, I am someone who, I won't say I'm that talkative a person, but I talk to everybody. As someone said, well, one of my colleagues at the high school said, well, you ain't know who you for? I don't know, you must know who I'm for.
Yeah.
Okay, and he is a very gregarious sort of person as well. And, just talking to people, and you get to form friendships, form bonds and what have you. And over the years, people keep seeing you at these events.
Various
and
meets and so on.
Yeah, and they kind of come to you. I mean, especially in terms of track and field, I went to, I think, 10 World Championships. And as I was saying to someone, where else would I have met somebody from Papua New Guinea or Vanuatu or Botswana or, even Ecuador? And, it's been interesting. The two of the more interesting groups of people, of athletes and officials that have come across are from, one set from Nigeria and a set from Cuba. And we've had some interesting encounters and adventures. But, it was quite fulfilling. And I think my colleagues in the area know that if they're looking for some information, I might be one of the earliest options that they could approach.
The resource person.
Sure.
Yeah. But now here we are now, many years later. What are you seeing as far as our sports? We've won quite a few medals. We've been to the Olympics quite a number of times.
Yeah, and the World Championships at
And
three
World
different
Championships
levels.
on 3 different levels.
Well,
what are you seeing?
There's been a lot of improvement on the talent level, on the coaching level, and what have you. But one of the things that sort of worries me is the fact that some of our young athletes, I'm not talking about many of them, don't seem to have any sense of connection with what has gone before. And even the way they approach other people. I have a saying that don't wait until it's time to say goodbye to learn to say hello. It's
So they're not farming those bonds and those regional, international contacts?
It's not happening. And as I was telling one of the young athletes who was going back to Central Arizona, in fact, she raised the issue that if there's a case where you are of equal ability with someone else, your statistics sort of gel, and the other person gives the coach some better vibes, you're going to stay where you are. And this is something that I think is very important, that the coaches, the parents and what have you come to realize. One of the things that before the time is up that I would like to address is that I think that there has to be a wider net cast in terms of inclusion of people from several areas of the island. Traditionally, in many of the sports, you have Rotown, Eastern Longlook, Seacoast Bay, and used to be Borgus Bay, which has a relatively small population. But I recall from my teaching days that there were always good athletes from Carrot Bay, but they just never seemed to have bothered too much with it. Now, there may be factors that no one has ever really paid much attention to. It was the most distant part of the island from Rotown. And transportation might not have been what it should have been. But certainly large population areas like Carrot Bay, like the Valley Virgin Gorda, have to start, producing more people who would graduate to the international team. There are a few decent basketball players from many of the areas, but to me, there's been quite a bit of underrepresentation.
But are we selecting athletes for the various sports on a fair basis where they're able to compete for positions on whatever national teams that we have? Because I see some basketball players in Bellevue and some in East End Look, as you say, that to me could be better national team players than some that we have on the team. But we
Sure.
seem to have this selection process as opposed to a competitive process.
That's true, but one also has to look at the fact that you can't tell someone how far he or she wants to go in a sport. I mean, they may just, while you realize that that individual might have greater physical gifts than others, he or she may just look at it as something to pass the time until something better is found.
Yeah, but still, I'm thinking that you need to present the opportunity for as many persons as possible to showcase their talent, and then you can select. Now, if they refuse, then there's nothing you can do. But not to have the opportunity to show your talent. I think that's where we have a challenge.
I don't know if you would recall, I think it would have been when Mr. Chalwell was at the Youth Affairs and Sports. There was this thing that they call the Ray O'Neill Games. Much of the activity would have taken place at what was then it's still the festival ground, because the track was closed for the better part of 3 years. But there were a number of different sports going on. And, there was quite a bit of enthusiasm building up in the villages. Now, having said that, we go back to, let's say, the 70s and the 80s, where in softball, for instance, all the games were not concentrated in town. You had a field in
Carrot Bay,
East End, you had Bargus, Bayreuth, and Seacoast Bay.
Yes.
And there also the sense of being part of a village existed quite a bit more then. Whether or not that will ever come back, I'm not sure.
Do you think that hurt softball, the centralization of softball hurt?
At the time that it happened, it seemed like a good idea. But in retrospect, I don't think it worked, quite as well as it should.
Is that something you think we should go back, try to?
I think it should.
To resuscitate
I think
go
it
back?
should. The other thing that one has to look at is the fact that it may have been just before you came to high school, but in the early days, the big sports were cricket and softball.
Yes.
What happened to cricket? Essentially, one of the main problems was that the guys who played never taught their sons to play. And to some extent, that has happened in softball as well. Even if it's a matter of it's not just a matter of teaching the skills, but it's letting them see you there when they're trying to accomplish something.
But one of the things that I notice is that we don't, like in other cities, in other countries, they channel or funnel their athletes through their school systems, from primary school all the way up to college. But we don't seem to do that here. We seem to have leagues of adults or young men and women outside of the education process.
Well, the primary school competitions in some sports is fairly healthy. I'm quite worried about it.
But we don't have like leagues though
not really.
In a school competition.
Well, I mean, when I was teaching, when you had House 1 and House 2 playing a softball game, you had more people coming to see that game than you would find at a league game now.
Yes.
And I mean, there were some solid players there as well. The high school 1 year had a softball team in the league, and usually didn't get wiped out. But I recall, I think we won 2 games. And the last game that we played the Marlins, who were the most powerful team in the league at that time. And the high school team's captain was Elton Smith. I don't know if the nickname Elibit means anything.
Yes, I know Elibit.
Okay,
yes.
you know Elibit. And Elibit went and told the Marlins, well, we mightn't beat you every day, but today is ours. And I said, Elibit, please don't stir the pot. No, we did in fact beat them. And but some of the guys who played for a high school team had previously played for teams within the league, and then after it was like a 1-year experiment, if you want to call it that, and then they went back to the teams representing the villages that they came from.
We finally at 3 o'clock, unfortunately. We could go on and on because
Yeah.
there's so much to talk about in sports now. We have been having some success with our basketball players, the latest one being
Cleon?
Cleon Penn going to the Timberwolves, I think.
Wrong team, though.
Well, perhaps. I mean,
Yeah, they are. That's the team with more big men than maybe any in the league.
okay.
So
there perhaps are opportunities for him to go to a different
Yeah.
team that would have greater needs for him.
Yes, yeah.
But we've now moved into that level. We had, of course, Tahisha Harrigan
Chantel
and been to Olympics. They've gone as far as
Yeah.
the semifinals.
Semifinals. Well, and Taisha actually won a medal at the World Indoors.
Yeah. What advice do you have for young athletes? And finally, where do we go from here in terms of sport development, not just in track and field,
Yeah.
but of course in other sports as well?
Well, it's said to get something out of anything, you have to put something in, and a lot of the sports, the team sport should have an easier go of it, at least in theory, because sports like track and field and swimming and tennis, they can be lonely sports. I mean, you're there and, you know, it's, well, why am I doing all of this? Am I going to make a national team? The team sports, though, what I've found has happened here on occasion is that you can get the big fish in a small pond mentality.
Yes.
And people think that they will, let's say, leave a sport like track and think that they're going to go to basketball because it's less harassing, as they say. Not such a thing. Not at the international level.
Yeah.
You know, so
The hard work is necessary wherever you go.
Wherever you go.
Yeah.
You know, to ascend to the point where you can make an impact to represent your country. It's not easy.
So we want to encourage them to put in the hard work, and we want to develop perhaps more coaching, more facilities. I mean, where are we in those areas?
We are not that badly off in terms of facilities. I mean, as I say, I recall when, you had the softball field that you had in town was where it is now. The A.O. Shirley ground was created around 1970, if I'm not mistaken. Yeah, I think it was 1970, because in track and field you used to train up at Wickham's Key 2, where Neville Burke's property is. It was sand. And an American guy who lived in Virginia, Mike Jacinto, he got some conduit pipe and he banged in some staples, and that was our 400 track. And in several of the other sports, remember that until recently they were playing basketball on a very hard
floor, concrete surface.
Concrete surface.
Yes.
You know, and that takes a lot lot out of the body. And but you have a facility coming up in East End with largely soccer, football, but I would imagine other sports will be able to make use of facility
track
too.
and field as well,
Yes.
and basketball.
Yeah, and you know, it would be nice if there could be some sort of.
Is the training adequate though? The coaching adequate?
The coaching is getting there. You know, it's a lot of coaching isn't necessarily teaching skills. It's interpersonal relationships. You know, how you can convince someone to go beyond where they think they can, and make a go of it. And you know, also trying to impress on them that it would be to their advantage to try to get as much out of their academic ability as possible. Everybody's not going to be an outstanding student, obviously, but we've had a few, and chances are we could have more.
You're still involved, or you just?
I'm still involved. I'm involved in a lot of statistical projects for track and field in the greater Caribbean, and it's still nice when a Kyron McMaster comes in and you know, chats. He just turned 19 this month, and he's one who is in Arizona now, along with the Gums twins, you know, who have done pretty well.
Okay, well, that's great. Well, it's good to have had you. Good for the little chat. We're gonna have to do this again longer. a longer time.
Yeah, that would be
because,
nice.
Because there's a lot to talk about, and
Yeah.
I'm sure you still have much more to contribute. I want to thank you for your contribution, and certainly I think from where you sit, you can see that sports in the BVI has certainly come a long way, and
Yeah.
we have a way to go, and we could really make a good success of it.
Yeah. Well, just before one of the last things I want to stress is the fact that, for instance, in sailing, we had a very good sail at the Olympics in Atlanta, but there's been nobody since then, and we're talking now 20 years. There is a chance that we can have some people qualify, but it's not that we haven't had people with sailing skills. You know, the Optimist program and the CATS and whatever, they're good feeder programs, and they're good feeder programs in many sports, but I say it's a matter of moving from point A to point B and beyond.
And lastly, what more you think the government can do?
What more can the government do?
You think they're doing enough as it is?
They're doing
Just
quite a
need
bit.
more
I
funding,
think
we need more facilities.
we need facilities, and as I said, there are certain areas. For instance, a swimming pool in Virgin Gorda that should be, as I understand it, a national facility that still has not been completed, and as the other population areas that I signaled, I don't know if anyone has really thought, well, could something happen in these areas, and
decentralize
some of the sports, yes. Yeah.
Thanks a lot for coming by.
Okay, thank you.
Yes.
Okay.
All the best.
All right.
Yes, we've had a conversation with Ray O'Neill, OB, one of great contributors to the sports development here in the territory. Hopefully we could get to talk to him again at another time and talk some more, because he's got a wealth of knowledge about sports in the territory. We're going to take a break for a word from our sponsors. When we come back, we're going to come back with Teacher Jenny and Dr. Carl Dawson. We're going to talk about 50 years of achievement in the Virgin Islands and give you a quick view of a new edition of the book, 50 Years of Achievement, the 2015 edition, and talk about how far we've come in terms of our social, political, economic, values development. Keep it locked right at the Spotlight. We'll be right back after these words from our sponsors.
Spotlight is brought to you by Tortola Concrete Limited, the National Bank of the Virgin Islands, and CCT Global Communications.